3 years ago, Marvel Phase 3 ended with Spider-Man Far From Home, and now we're reaching the end of Phase 4. And during Phase 4, there's been a lot of mixed reviews from fans, some calling it great, while others have been calling it Phase Bore. So, without further ado, let's dive in. After nearly 2 years and 14 projects, not including Wakanda Forever, we are reaching the end of Phase 4. So I'm going to go through and rate all the movies and shows and give my rating of the phase. But let's start at the beginning of Phase 4 with... Given a 98% by critics and an 88% by audiences on Rotten Tomatoes, WandaVision is one of my favorite Phase 4 shows. It has great mystery and suspense that kept me guessing, and I always wanted to see what happened next. I really like how Monica and Sword are used in the series. And they even include Evan Peters. Evan Peters, who played Quicksilver in the X-Men movies, and it turns out that Wanda accidentally brought him from another universe, and this caused the multiverse to break open. Oh wait. That's not what happened. No, instead they brought him in to play some random guy who stood in for Wanda's brother Pietro, who was being controlled by Agatha just for him to make a joke? Why? What a waste. Hopefully we get to see him as Quicksilver in the MCU, and let's not forget about this line.
You'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
Other than those two things, everything else I have a problem with is just nitpicks. So I give WandaVision an 8 out of 10. Okay. Critics gave this show a score of 84%, and audiences gave it 83%. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is an MCU show that falls somewhere in the middle for me. The characters of Falcon and Bucky are a great combination, and they did a great job of showing how they will handle situations differently. For example, when they needed help, Bucky suggests breaking Zemo out to help them. Sam said no, but Bucky had already done it. They also show how Sam and Bucky operate differently from John Walker when it came to stopping the Flag Smashers, and how they developed John Walker's character was great. My main problem with this show is how they presented Flag Smashers. I wasn't 100% sure what their plan was or how they were going to complete their goal. Oh, and...
Senator, you've got to step up.
The first time I watched this show, it was exciting, but when I was rewatching it, I was bored. So I gave this show a 5 out of 10.
I see the clowns are playing their parts to perfection.
With a critic score of 92% and an audience score of 90%, Loki is also another favorite of mine. One problem I have with this show is I wish they weren't sitting and talking the whole time. I wish they move around more in the multiverse, but at least when we were sitting down, we were trying to figure out information to solve the case. But when we did go to the other timelines, I wish they had more familiar places. Like when they go to Lamentus, they have to get off the planet before it gets destroyed. Yeah, cool, but this event could have happened in our normal timeline. For instance, if the Guardians were to be stranded on a planet and they had to figure out a way to get off it before it was destroyed, it would play out more or less the same as it did in the show. Some parts feel more like planet hopping instead of hopping timelines. The multiverse aspect could have been used better, so that we could see the unique scenes and interactions we can't get in other shows and movies. I also think Loki could have been presented as more of a threat, because the TV explained that Lokis are there to bring out the best in others, but that's because Loki is an opponent that is always a step ahead, and in the show, he never is. Overall, I really like this show, and it does a lot of things right.
But it can be better.
I give the show a 7 out of 10. Now for the first film of Phase 4, with a critic score of 79% and an audience score of 91%. Black Widow is one of my least favorite MCU movies because it seems the only job of this movie was to introduce Yelena so we can know who she is in Hawkeye. This movie has similar scenes and themes to other spy thrillers like Captain America and the Winter Soldier and Jason Bourne, but this movie doesn't always use them correctly. And the reveal of Taskmaster being the daughter of Dreykov didn't make much sense. It would have been better if they had the daughter of a different character who was still after Natasha instead of making her Taskmaster. And why did the final battle in the movie have to take place in a sky base like in Winter Soldier? But it was really cool how Natasha fought her way through General Ross and his men. Oh wait, that didn't happen. It just cut to 2 weeks later with no explanation of how she got away. But guess what? We finally found out how she got the jet and vest she has in Infinity Wars. I give this movie a 5 out of 10. But this movie and the whole MCU would have played out completely differently in another universe. So,
follow me and ponder the question, what if?
With a critic score of 94% and an audience score of 93, I don't have much to say about this show. Each episode gives exactly what the show is called. What if Ultron won? What if Ultron won? What if Captain Carter was the first Avenger? And in the end, all the characters from each episode come together to save the multiverse. I think the multiverse was used well in this show, and especially the last 2 episodes. I think it would have been cool to see these versions of the characters interact with another version of themselves. The What If Thor was an Only Child episode was not my favorite, but I really liked What If Killmonger rescued Tony Stark. I give this show a 6 out of 10. One of my favorite movies of this phase so far was given a 91% by critics and a 98% by audience, and that is ShangChi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I really liked the fighting and the action scenes in this movie, and the way they showed the relationship between ShangChi and his father was done very well. The only problem is when the monster showed up at the end. I think the final battle with the movie was great, but why couldn't it have just been a fight between ShangChi and his father? It's like I was saying with Black Widow while fighting from a sky base. Sure, it looks cool, but is it necessary? And same with this, I think it would have been better if they didn't bring the monster into the fight. I give this movie an 8 out of 10. Now, let's talk about the lowest rated Marvel movie with a 47% by critics and 77% by audiences, Eternals. One reason I don't like this movie is because of how it affects the MCU, but we'll get to that later. The story is what you get when you introduce 10 characters, each with their own story, in a 2.5-hour movie, and has them turn on each other to decide if they want to save the world or not. Marvel, please stop threatening to end the world. No Way Home is coming out in less than a month. After this, the world's not going to get destroyed. The world's not ending. And Crow was an interesting villain, that he was being used, but they threw him away to have a typical third act fight scene. But this is the same problem I had with Black Widow and Shang-Chi. Why do you need a big earth-shattering event? It could just be a fight between a group members. Remember Civil War? Civil War had 10 people in it too. The difference was we already knew those characters from the other movies that they were in, and the end was more focused. It could have been Cap, Iron Man, and Bucky against a bunch of super soldiers, but instead they started fighting each other, which brings a better conclusion to the story. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about how this affects the MCU. Firstly, let's look at the comics. In the comics, the Eternals are evolved humans, and it's explained that Thanos is an Eternal with the deviant gene. That's why he looks different. Now, I'm not expecting them to do the same thing as the comic did, but here's the problem. In the movie, they explain that the Eternals are advanced AI put on Earth to stop deviants from killing people to make sure the population grows. Then, after the end credits scene, they say Thanos' brother is an Eternal, so that means Thanos is also an Eternal. So why would the Celestials create an AI that has a deviant gene? That just doesn't make sense. And if they put it on Earth to make sure the population grows, why wouldn't they get involved with Thanos? He's an Eternal with a deviant gene. Your whole purpose is to stop deviants. Your whole movie contradicts this because the Eternals are fighting each other over Tiamat coming out of the Earth, which is a result of population growth. I'm not going to keep going into this. The more you find out the comics about the Eternals, the more you realize it really messes up the MCU. This movie feels completely disconnected from the other movies, and I keep forgetting about it. I give this a 4 out of 10. Moving on. Okay, Hawkeye. With a critic score of 92% and an audience score of 89%, Hawkeye is another show I really like. One problem I have with this show are the LARPers. I think it could have been done without it, but I think the show was trying to be more fun and entertaining than anything else, so I don't have much of a problem with it. And same with the way the tracksuits are presented. They feel more like NPCs than actual threats. While it's good for a show to be fun and entertaining, I think it has some drawbacks. Like when they introduced Yelena, she felt like she was just placed in a show, and after 6 years we finally got Kingpin, played by the same guy in the Daredevil show, but he doesn't feel like Kingpin. He felt more like a generic crime boss in any other show. I think Kate's story in the show was good, and she's one of the only new heroes I could see eventually working alongside other heroes. I give the show a 6 out of 10. Next is my favorite MCU show. With a critic score of 86% and an audience score of 90%, the story of Mark and Steven and how he became Moon Knight was done very well. Layla's character was handled well too, and Harrow had a clear goal and how he was going to get it done. I really liked the character and the development we got in episode 5, but it had some problems. My main problems with this show is the final battle. When Moon Knight is on the ground and Layla is being shot at, it looks like Harrow is going to win, but then Mark switches to Jake. But we don't see any of the fight, we just see the aftermath. I think this works throughout the show, but not for the final battle. The thing we have been building towards over the course of the entire show, and then we don't even get to see it. This makes the defeat of Amet feel rushed. I give the show an 8 out of 10. Now, for the third film of Phase 4, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. With a critic score of 74% and an audience score of 85%, I'm not a fan of this movie. Now, I think this movie has some great moments, but for a film called Multiverse of Madness, I don't think we got to see the madness in the multiverse. We see a 1 or 2 minute scene of him in America going through the different universes, and that was so quick and it had no weight on the story. For instance, in Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension, they travel through all the dimensions really quickly, but it's for the purpose of trying to get back to their dimension while running from robots. While this movie, they just fall through the multiverse and yeah, it looks cool, but that doesn't mean much. Even Everything Everywhere All at Once showed them in other universes, and it has more weight because of the character interaction. If you're going to do a multiversal film, the character needs to see how their variant acts and learns things from them. But this fails to do that. Also, what was the Illuminati scene? I mean, when Wanda said, "What mouth?" I was in shock. And that fight between Wanda and the team was amazing. But the Illuminati was such a waste. If you want to use a team for Wanda to fight in a multiverse movie, here's an idea for Britain Core, or the Council of Reeds. You know, the ancestor of Kang, who is the main villain of this saga. And America was used more like a MacGuffin more than anything else. Hopefully in the future she becomes more of a character. I don't hate this film, but I think it missed a huge opportunity. I give this film a 6 out of 10. I think this next show works well on its own, but I can't see this character fighting alongside other characters in MCU. The show I'm talking about is Ms. Marvel. This has a critic score of 97% and an audience score of 80%. Now, I don't think this show is terrible unlike other projects, but it doesn't do everything right. Sometimes it feels like Kamala is just getting powers. She can make platforms, now she can make giant fists, now she can time travel. First she's a genie, now she's a mutant. So where do her powers come from? Why did they change her from an Inhuman? But beyond that, there are other problems, and not things like she improved with her abilities too quickly. I'm talking about some of the characters. If a character is mad or upset in the episode, it will be resolved. Or characters just act differently. What was that ending? I know a lot of people are saying it reminds them of Home Alone, but to me, I felt like I was watching Money Heist. Now I get why people would say Home Alone, by the way the damage control reacts to some of the traps. But hear me out. Outside the school, there were cops, a barricade, then a crowd of people, same as Money Heist. Then they set up a bunch of traps to distract the cops so that they could do their real plan, just like Professor would do in Money Heist. You have two cops who don't see eye to eye, just like Money Heist. These two hit similar beats. I could list other similarities, but I think you see my point. I give this show a 5 out of 10. Now for my least favorite MCU Phase 4, with a critic score of 64% and an audience score of 77%, is Thor: Love and Thunder. This movie has characters with similar stories, but there's never a connection made with them. We have Jane, someone Thor cares about who is dealing with cancer. This could have been a great moment between Thor and Peter Quill. Instead of Thor leaving the Guardians because of Gore, what if Peter told Thor to go see Jane? Because Peter knows Thor will regret it if he didn't see her, because he went through this when he was a kid. Or look at the similarities between Gore and Jane. They are both sick people that were given powers from an object that is hurting them. There was no connection made between these scenarios. Also, why is Valkyrie still the king of Asgard? She's not a king, she's a Valkyrie. She can't run the nation, and they showed that Thor was better equipped for the role. At the end of the movie, they could have made him king again, but why would they want to do that, right? I mean, What was the point of making him king at the end of Ragnarok if he was just going to undo it? It was a waste of time. The best part of this movie was Christian Bale as Gore, and why have a character called Gore the God Butcher and not show him butchering gods? But it gets better. Instead of him going around killing gods, he's going to steal Stormbreaker so he can make a wish to a genie to wish all gods away. Why? Why couldn't we see a fight between Gore and Zeus instead of Thor? Also, stop making Thor into a joke. I give this movie a 4 out of 10. Now for my least favorite TV show with a critic score of 72% and an audience score of 35%, I give you She-Hulk. This show speaks for itself on how bad it is. Jen keeps saying to remember whose show it is, but if it wasn't for Daredevil, a lot of people wouldn't have watched this show after episode 2. So let's start with the cameos. The first character they had show up was Wong, and he was fine in the episode with Abomination, but then came episode 4 where he tried to sue Johnny Blaze for using a sling ring, and after explaining how dangerous it is for the rings to fall into the wrong hands, he still is trying to deal with it legally to set an example. You know what would really set an example? Going up to Blaze, forcefully taking the ring from him. What's he gonna do? You're the Sorcerer Supreme. This makes Wong look like he can't do his job. Imagine in No Way Home, instead of Strange trying to get the box back from Peter, he said, I need to set an example, and then Strange sues Peter for stealing the box and breaking the multiverse. You see how stupid that sounds? Or even when America took the sling ring in Multiverse of Madness, Strange and Wong just took the ring back. And it's not like Wong only operates within the confines of the law, because in other episodes he breaks Abomination out of prison twice. Least favorite episode. Now the episode with Daredevil is the best, and not just because Matt Murdock is there. It's the best because it shows She-Hulk being an attorney at law, even though she's not very good at it. The finale was also another episode I liked. When the Disney Plus screen popped up, I thought I hit something on my remote. It was great, but when Jen started changing everything, then we went back to the show, they cut past a season worth of build-up. And if they wanted to introduce Hulk's son, there had to be a better way than just a quick scene. Same with telling us the Sokovia Accords were appealed. And if they wanted to introduce the Hulk's son, there had to be a better way than just a quick scene. Same with telling us the Sokovia Accords were appealed. Why would they appeal the Accords? That doesn't make sense. The whole point of them is to prevent things like Sokovia. And this is the first time we're hearing about the Accords since Civil War. Maybe Homecoming? I give this show a 4 out of 10. And finally, one of the best, if not the best, definitely the most violent by MCU standards, Werewolf by Night. Given a 91% by critics and a 90% by audiences. Going into this show, I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was this was an hour special and it was going to be in black and white. The way they set up the characters was great. And when Ted burned that guy, I was shocked. And the fight scene with Elsa and Werewolf by Night, great. It was cool to see a darker show from Marvel, and I think they should do more things like this. I give this a 9 out of 10.
Is that everyone?
Oh, I missed Spider-Man No Way Home. With a 93% by critics and a 98% by audience, this movie speaks for itself. We got to see 3 generations of Spider-Man characters come together in one movie that led with a great apartment fight and another great fight between Spider-Man and Goblin. By far my favorite Phase 4 film, 9 out of 10. With all the movies and shows so far, I give Phase 4 a 90 out of 140, or a 64% deep. I will be making a review of the final 2 Phase 4 projects and give my final rating. Wakanda Forever and the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special both have to be at least a 6 out of 10 for this score to stay the same. Let's hope it doesn't go any lower. But until then...
Let's go, yes.